I get it. You're standing in front of a wall of subwoofer options, scrolling through specs, trying not to waste a few $100 on something that sounds great on paper but ends up just rattling the room. You've probably heard the hype about deep, clean bass and room-filling power, but you also know the disappointment of a sub that either overpowers the rest of the system or stays stubbornly quiet in the corners of your listening space. So before you click Add to Cart, let's walk through the real-world experience of the SVS SB5000R Evolution and figure out whether it actually delivers the kind of performance you need or if it's a luxury you can live without. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, the SB5000 isn't trying to be a budget fill-in. It's positioned as a high-end, sealed-box subwoofer that leans on a 15-inch glass fiber composite cone. That cone isn't just a marketing buzzword. The material gives the driver a very stiff yet lightweight diaphragm, which translates into quicker transients and tighter control over the low frequencies. In practice, that means you'll feel the punch of a drum hit or the low rumble in a movie scene without that muddy, boomy blurry bass that cheap cones tend to produce. If you're someone who spends evenings binge-watching action films on a home theater setup, the sealed design is a big plus. A sealed cabinet doesn't have the port resonance you hear with many budget subs, so the bass stays consistent whether you're watching a quiet dialogue scene or an explosion. I've set this unit up in a medium-sized living room, about 300 square feet, and paired it with a 7.2-channel speaker system. The first thing I noticed was how quickly the sub responded to the on-screen action. When a low-frequency rumble started, it didn't take a second to fill the room, and when the scene cut to silence, the tail faded cleanly instead of lingering like a low-frequency echo. That's the kind of precision you need for an immersive movie night. For music lovers, especially those who gravitate toward genres heavy on bass like electronic, hip-hop, or even orchestral works with deep timpani, the SB5000's Auto EQ room correction is worth highlighting. The unit uses a built-in microphone and a smartphone app to measure your room's acoustics and then tailors the sub's output to compensate for standing waves or dead spots. In my own testing, I ran the calibration in a rectangular bedroom with a carpeted floor and a couple of large windows. The software identified a mild boost needed around 45 Hz, which is a common problem area in smaller rooms, and adjusted the output accordingly. The result was a smoother bass response that didn't feel boosted but rather naturally integrated with the main speakers. Now, let's talk about who actually benefits from these features. If you have a dedicated home theater room, a fairly sizable space, or you're willing to spend a little time tweaking placement and calibration, the SB5000R Evolution is a solid match. Its dual voice coil design lets you wire it in series or parallel, offering flexibility if you ever want to pair it with another sub for a more intense low-frequency effect. The internal reinforcement and acoustic insulation also mean the cabinet stays rigid even at high excursions, so you won't hear unwanted rattling when you crank the volume for a concert-style bass experience. On the other hand, if you live in a compact apartment where you can't place the sub on a solid piece of furniture or you're dealing with thin walls that transmit vibrations to neighbors, this might be overkill. The sealed box, while precise, can still push a lot of air displacement, and at higher volumes the low-frequency pressure can travel through floor joists and cause complaints. In those scenarios, a smaller, ported subwoofer with a lower output ceiling could be a more neighbor-friendly choice. Also, the unit weighs close to 70 pounds, so moving it around isn't a trivial task. If you anticipate frequent rearranging of your room layout, the heft could become a nuisance. Practical strengths show up when you push the SB5000 into a movie night mode. The unit can sustain deep bass at high SPLs without distorting, which is something I've seen with cheaper sealed subs that start to sound woolly once they hit the upper limit of their excursion range. Because of the glass fiber cone's stiffness, the driver doesn't flex as much under heavy demand, so you retain definition even at the bottom end of the scale. In real-world terms, that translates to a clean, articulate bass line in a live-recorded jazz performance, where you can hear the double bass pluck clearly, versus a vague, indeterminate thump. Weaknesses are subtle but matter. The SVS app's Auto EQ is a great starting point, but it isn't a substitute for manual fine-tuning if you're an audiophile who likes to sculpt the response curve themselves. Some reviewers have noted that the preset curves can feel a bit generic after calibration, especially in rooms with highly reflective surfaces. You might need to spend a few minutes adjusting the crossover point and phase manually to get